Hello, everybody. Scott Golden here with the Mid South Wrestling Review Series for the 25th, yes, Christmas Day, of 1981. And obviously, we've just started this particular series. Hopefully, you enjoy it as you have with our other series. And actually, I will be honest and say the next program, the review series for 81, or I guess review program for 81, not going to be the best for me because most of the 1981 stuff I haven't seen. So the cliffs of matches that Bill Watts highlights, I'm not going to be able to add a lot of insight to, and that kind of frustrates me a little bit. But anyway, we kind of move forward here into the Christmas Day edition. And obviously, that's a pretty big deal. The year I was born, I'm only a couple of months old at this point, so certainly did not watch this stuff as it happened in real time. Grateful that we can do that on a monthly basis here. Anyway, Mike George and Carlos Zapata versus Novak and Ferrara here in the opening contest. Love the fact that there are a lot of, really basic matches here in 1981. This is basically a contenders match, challenge match to see who can do what where and kind of give extra oomph and whatever to whomever, wherever, whatever. And, matches count enough that something like this matters and counts and means something. Basic tie up by both men here, and don't really know going in the history between the teams. I also don't know enough about them to give background. I know Zapata is a big part of World Class. Zapata's team is caught off guard a little bit. Mike George, obviously a tag champ, with the Junkyard Dog at a point. Match does go to the outside, toss to the outside, and some beautiful drop kicks by George, who's a bit stocky. Bill Watts on commentary, phenomenal as always. As a matter of fact, I would even say should be required listening for anyone who ever wants to do commentary. And Mike George's team eventually does pick up the victory. We move to another match here. Paul Ellering and the Iron Sheik. They do a highlight package of what happened last week with him doing the Persian clubs. They move into a secondary sort of thing with that where, again, he does 50. Sheik manages to, make that a pretty big deal. And he's dancing around. The Iron Sheik picks up the clubs, and obviously Skandar Akbar makes a pretty big deal out of that, and that is unfinished between the two. Obviously there again, the Iron Sheik, a guy who at the time had not won the World Wrestling Federation Championship yet, been around for a while. He does not swing the clubs here. And Bill Watts pretty intense about all of that. Pretty intense about the Sheik stalling the previous week and everything that goes with it. We do go to another area where the Iron Sheik, who, if he is to win, is supposed to do double what Paul Ellering does with the clubs, which means shaking them or swinging them 100 times, not 1,000 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And Sheik is pretty massive here. He does not get to the 100 times, and so he attacks Paul Ellering as is to be expected. That is going to set their feud off. Ellering having been out of action for quite a bit of time. And, that's a pretty big deal. Being out for 6 months in 1981 is a substantial length of time, but also B, when you're at the time you're out, you don't get paid, and so imagine not getting paid for 6 months, um, and so you know the Ellering is there. He's begging for or petitioning for the money that he feels rightfully owed, and he goes back and does the deal a second time. Iron Sheik attacks before he can actually beat the Sheik, and body slam, tosses the referee to the outside, assaults the referee, camel clutch, and obviously the whole deal is to set up a feud with Paul Ellering and the Iron Sheik at the time. Pretty big deal there in the end of 1981. And spitting on Ellering is a big deal here. That brawl goes on quite a bit, suplex, and the Sheik looks pretty intense at the time. Paul Orndorff and B. Brian Blair up next. They are actually very good friends going back to their collegiate days. Both guys do a lock. Now, here's an awesome thing. Early in the match, lockup by both guys, and they actually fight through the lockup onto the mat. In other words, they are making a collar elbow tie-up look like a competitive thing. And I know everyone's going to say, oh, well, it's not a high spot, it's not fun. But here's the thing. If you are angry, if you are fired up in the early stages, they're going to take the rest of the match more seriously. This crowd, for the TV taping, taking everything seriously. Head scissors by Blair, and he's got Orndorff down. He's looking pretty serious. Neck bridges by Orndorff, who rolls through and gets a grapevine of the legs. I mean, the mat work here is tremendous. If you are an aspiring indie wrestler, if you ever think about getting into wrestling, go and watch this match and see how they turn mat wrestling into something that makes a crowd respond. And I realize everyone's saying it's, 40 years later, but at the same time, this stuff can still work. You might need to update what moves you use. You might need to update how long you hold a move. You might not be able to hold it for 2 minutes, but maybe you can hold it for 1. Anyway, continuance, and they use a pretty big, tendency towards the wrist lock. Does Orndorff. Orndorff comes up and out, shoulder tackle. Attempts a power slam, doesn't get it. The attempt of the Oklahoma roll, but Orndorff, smart, ducks down, ducks through the middle rope, uses his brain, and makes sure that his adversary clotheslines himself in the throat. Guess worth mentioning, Bob Roop on the outside. For Orndorff, they have established a friendship of some sort, of which I am not aware at the time. Again, watching this as though it's real time and coming in at this point. Maybe I will find that out going back through in a while. Orndorff does lock on the figure 4, or Blair gets locked in the figure 4, and Orndorff turns it over into the inverted or Indian Deathlock style of the figure 4. The referee is eventually forced to, I believe, actually stop things here. The referee calls the match because Blair cannot compete, recover, whatever have you, and Orndorff gets a victory here. We move into another match relatively quickly, which I like the pacing of Mid-South. There's a bunch of wrestling. The referee actually does an interview with Boyd Pierce and basically says he felt the need to stop things at a time that's appropriate. I think referees that look credible, another thing missing in today's product by far. Ted DiBiase, your North American champion, against Mike Boyer. pretty big deal there, as your North American champion being in the ring is a good sign. DiBiase's got challengers coming from every corner, and he looks like $1,000,000 regardless. He has the North American champion, which is basically the top championship in the area. Should look, at least one would think. Um, and so, but we still got. I mean, think about this. You know, in what 15 minutes they got 4 matches. So everyone says, "Oh, now the matches are too short." It's not that the matches today are too short. It's that the content of the wrestling is not sufficient to get people truly interested. DiBiase, a lot of mat time, takedown, and the like. Boyer having a hard time with DiBiase, doing some sit-out ride time. But it all looks competitive. It all looks like they're angry. It all looks like they're fighting. It all looks like somebody cares who wins and loses the whole match. And even if that's 4 or 5 minutes, if you've got guys who make it look that way, then you can go, hey, I wonder who's going to win. Then you can go, hey, and again, something simple, but I made note. Boyer tries to flip DiBiase with a abdominal stretch, cannot get the job done, and actually they trip that into a almost submission there into a backslide. So every move counts. It means something, and I think if you had that today, where every move mattered, ultimately wrestling would not have the 1 million, 1.5 million, maybe if we're generous, 2 million people watching in any given total program. Anyway, Irish whip and big power slam by DiBiase, but it's a hanging power slam. It's not smooth. Looks like he has trouble getting him over, and then he locks in the figure four, gets the victory. Routinely in Mid-South, it looks like there's challenges to getting guys over. Bob Roop and Bob Orton against Mike Bond and Frank Monty. Obviously, this is meant to be a tune-up match for Roop and Orton. So obviously, Roop a pretty big factor here in the area. Bond comes up off of a sunset flip on Orton. Orton not happy with that, obviously. Who would be, right? But at the same time, they kind of go through it, tag off, and the baby faces take over for just a few minutes, enough with basic holds, headlocks, hammer locks, and the like to make you wonder. Head scissors a few times, takes Roop over. Roop bumping around even though he's a big guy, but he comes up, and when he comes up, he's always kind of backtracking, but he looks like he's caught off guard, but not begging, not, loopy. And so that's another factor. Tag off to Orton. Orton gets the advantage back for his team. Big slam by Roop. Roop, again, the stockier fellow who, looks more powerful, looks more devastating that way. Kind of gets the impression that he's going to do a bit of damage. Orton comes back in, finds himself on the receiving end of some headlock takeovers, finds himself getting taken down a bit, and they do the crisscross. Blind tag spot. Roop is the legal man in, and he manages to hit a running knee at the back of the neck of one of his foes. 1, 2, 3, and Roop and Orton are victorious. We move on to another key match here, which again, World Mid-South, and I keep wanting to call it World Class because I did so much with World Class. Always looking competitive match-wise. Always looking like every match could be something. Ed Wiskowski, who we've seen 3 weeks in a row now. That's another thing. WWE has so many talents that you can miss people, or you don't care about them when you see them. And I actually care about where Wiskowski is going. And I've seen him 3 times now. Like, it's such a different world. Anyway, he faces Tom Ernesto Jr. and, punch, kick, real basic stuff. Knees to the back, knees to the spine. Of course, he later becomes Colonel De Beers. Ernesto Jr. has some trouble keeping himself from getting back to a vertical base once he's been taken down. Wiskowski takes him into the corner, hits a few shots, and hits a backbreaker. 1, 2, 3 gets a victory there, and we still got 3 or 4 minutes, which means another match. In this case, Iron Sheik in a enhancement matchup. Let me see here. Iron Sheik and Don Serrano. And that match doesn't even happen because it leads to a brawl between the Paul Ellering, who was jumped earlier, and Iron Sheik. Ellering comes out looking the better of the two in that situation, and the idea that you'll see them hook them up in 1982 is pretty evident. But that is this particular week. We will be back with December 30th, which is a review show, so probably not as long a review because it's a little more out of my wheelhouse. But anyway, we'll be back with more of this right after this.